That. All right. Good afternoon for everybody, I believe, and welcome to today's session, which is brilliant at the work and invisible to your market, how to close more deals in a quiet market. So, goal for today is to spend about an hour with you where we'll go through our system, which is designed to help you bring in a steady, predictable flow of high value clients. So I'd like to make this as interactive as possible. So by all means, use the chat and let's have a conversation. So let's just start with, is this you? So I'm going to assume that if you're here, you have real expertise, you get great results for your clients. If you employ people, they're generally pretty good at what they do, but most people that I know of that we work with, certainly in professional services, avoid sales somewhat like the plague. They think that everything is about delivery, and they think that selling is pushy or sometimes even beneath them. And you'd be surprised at how many really good consultants we come across who really don't like the word sales. So at the beginning, let me just do one thing. Let me reframe the word sales to mean to serve, because ultimately we can't actually sell anything to anybody. People have to want to buy. And our job is to basically help them understand what it is that their problems are and how it is that we could help them solve some of those problems. And sometimes that's not obvious because people come in with problems that they think are obvious, but very often the problem is more deeply rooted than that. And our job in sales is to basically help them understand what the root causes of these problems are and show them a pathway to solving them if it's appropriate for them to work with us. So when we deal with people, a lot of people that I talk to, we know right now it's pretty obvious the economic circumstances are reasonably dire. People are making decisions. There's a lot of uncertainty. If who knows what's going to happen in the Middle East? Who knows what's going to happen with interest rates and everything else? But regardless of any of that, uh, we can't control those things. We have to control what we can control, and we can't control the competition. There's always going to be competition, and we have to be able to stand out in some way that makes people want to come to us because they understand that we understand the issues that they have. And if we can't stand out, then what happens is that we become a me too and becomes a commodity trap. And if you're a commodity trap, the obvious thing is everybody just looks at price. Now, the other thing that I talk to people about is everybody's working harder and harder and not getting results. And I don't know about you, but there are a lot of conversations that I've had. Very often you put proposals out and then absolutely nothing happens. They either ghost you or timing isn't right or priorities change. And therefore, the pipeline very often can look good, but deals stall and fall over at the last moment. And I've seen this happen time and time again, where somebody was working on a deal for a year and it fell over right at the last moment because somebody didn't actually figure out who else was involved in the decision-making process. And all of that means that revenue can be quite unpredictable. And what happens is that we, especially in consulting land, we go through this feast famine cycle because what happens is that people get caught up in doing the work because we love doing the work, and we neglect any sort of marketing and pipeline development, any sort of sales activity, and then all of a sudden projects come to an end and you're madly scrambling for the next project. But as we all know, if anybody gardens, anybody does anything like that, first you have to cultivate the soil, then you have to sow, then you have to water, and then you reap. And it's not simultaneous. Therefore, everything takes longer than you might think. And the better you can do things starting now and on a continuous basis when it comes to developing your pipeline, the more success you will have. And also, it removes any form of neediness, if you like. Because when we're scrambling for the next client, it comes across as being needy. It comes across as being something that, we desperately want, and people smell desperation and fear. So put something in the chat. Okay, can you relate to any of those, 1 to 5? And where do you sit on that spectrum? If you look at all of those questions, where do you sit with this? And the other question is where would you like to be in a year's time from now? So just put something in the chat. Okay, I'm going to make it a bit easier. Okay. More qualified leads with the right customers from Carlo. Joff, what about you? Just unmute yourself for a second. Talk to me.
Yeah, that'd be a lot easier. Um, yeah, our issue is more kind of the steady flow of inbound leads, really. We've got a high dependency on our existing client base. So, just being able to kind of grow the business requires that pipeline to be active. We don't really have an issue with conversion so much.
Okay. So it's more getting the right people into the funnel in the first place.
It's the top of the funnel, yeah.
It's
Yeah.
the top of the funnel. Okay.
I agree with Joff on that, and I think I said that to you actually
Yep.
in the original phone call that we had, that it's actually really getting smart about where the energy goes in terms of building that pipeline, in the first place, and really understanding the audience. So that's where the attention needs to be going for me at the moment.
Okay, fair enough. Good. So, having said that, a lot of people say that yes, the conversion rates are pretty high. And if I talk to people and they say, oh, look, I mean, okay, you convert maybe 1 in 3, 1 in 4. Some people even say they convert 50%. But actually, the reality is, and I've done a little bit of research on this, the real conversion rate from pipeline, as in somebody coming into the top of your pipeline to becoming a client for a professional services organization, tends to sit around 2.5%. So it's not warm, pre-qualified lead. It's somebody coming in top of tunnel all the way through to becoming a client at only 2.5%, which means somewhere around 97%, 97 out of 100 prospects basically do nothing. And therefore, increasing the conversion rate of people coming in the top of the pipeline and qualifying them really well is actually the biggest leverage point that you have. And it's all very well to have a whole series of leads coming in, but if those leads aren't qualified or, I spent 20 years in the IT industry before this, and the number of times people would come in, they basically just want to pick your brain. They want to learn from you. They were never going to become clients, but the risk is that you spend a lot of time with those sorts of people rather than actually spending time with people who are likely at some point to buy. Now, there's a caveat there as well, because at any particular time, maybe 3, maybe 4, maybe 5% of your market are really looking to buy at any one time. The rest of them, some of them will be open, maybe 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, a year down the track. Our record was actually 11 years between the first time we met somebody and they became a client. So not everybody is ready to buy, and therefore you've got to have a system to nurture them. And we're going to go through that in a minute. So if you can get your average conversion rate up, you're going to be a lot better from go to whoa. So for those of you who don't know me, I have an engineering background. I spent 20 years in IT with large American multinationals, first in highly technical roles and then sales and leadership roles. And then 25 years ago, when the dot-com came and went, the company I was working with basically folded. And at that point, I was looking for another job, and I was actually a senior general manager. And people said, "Oh, look, you're too old, now you're in the IT industry. You're too general and you don't have very specific experience in either telco or insurance or whatever." And I said, but hang on, I've run major projects for people like Qantas and I've worked with major consultancy companies like Fujitsu. What is the problem? Oh, no, you don't have very specific experience. So Barbara and I decided that we'd put out a shingle and we started Revealed Resources. Now, when we started, we basically, as any of you, when you started, had probably no clients. The network really wasn't there because all of my contacts were in the corporate world. And we realized that we needed to bring in money. And so one of the things we did was actually went out and started cleaning houses. And There's a point to the story because one of the people I was cleaning for was the managing director of a small subsidiary of a multinational. And at that point, he said, "Look, he wanted to grow the business, and he didn't really know what he needed to do." And so a couple of weeks later, I went to see him and basically put him on my newsletter list. And for a year, he got a newsletter once a week. Bang, 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 bang on marketing, sales, strategy. And he rang me up one day and he said, "Oh, look, I've got a problem with my sales team. Can you come and help?" We worked with him for about a year. And at that point, he was doing about $3 million a year. And he wanted to get up to about $10 million a year in turnover. And we put in a whole bunch of strategies and structure, hired some people, fired some people, and got him up to the $10 million mark. And a couple of years later, he was going off to New Zealand to take up another role. And he rang me up and he said, "Look, we actually made $11.5 million in turnover." And a lot of it was due to the foundational work that we did together. Now, the point of the story is not so much that we got him up to the 10 and then the 11.5. He did the work. We provided a lot of the strategy and the mindset and the thinking. The point is, at that point, before that, we had no system for bringing in a client. There was nothing. We thought, we'll just randomly turn up at some networking event and we'll do this, that, and the other, and people will just drop out of the trees. So getting Ken was an absolute fluke. And it made me realize that without that system, things were going to be really, really difficult. So that's what I want to talk to you about today. But having said that, we've got a limited time. So I am going to talk about the model that we use to align your strategy, your marketing, and your sales. And obviously, we can only scratch the surface. So with your permission, at the end of today, I am going to offer you a couple of ways that you could work with me together so that we can see how we can go forward. So just a couple of the clients we work with, I'm not going to go through all of them, but Coolser is the dental manufacturer that basically we went from 3 million to 11.5 million. Right Property Group has been one of our longest standing clients. When we first started working with them, almost.
Rashid, sorry, are you meaning to show us a slide?
Sorry. Thank you. Right Property Group, when we started working with them about 20 years ago, they were mortgage brokers. They then moved into wealth management, creating through properties. They just got voted the best property buyer in Australia last couple of months ago. When we started with them, just to give you an idea, they were charging $3,000 to find you an investment property. Today, they're charging $19,500. And it's that learning how to position yourself, how to market yourself. They get something like 400 referrals a year, which is phenomenal when you think about it. That doesn't mean they convert all of them, and I'll talk about that because that's where the sales process comes in. Quantum Financial, we worked with them for about 12 years. They became one of Australia's leading truly independent financial advisors. And so there are a number of different organizations that we work with. So Fairmont Equities is a stockbroker. We've been working with him at least 12, 13 years. Pixel Perfect was a very specialist niche photographic lab. He did what he thought was unthinkable, actually managed to sell the business. So we work with a whole variety of different types of industries, but they tend to be professional services based. So I want to talk about the framework that we use, the 3P framework. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to draw it up. So everything sits on the triangle. Tell me if you can see that. Okay. So at the base of the triangle, we have strategy. And the reason we have strategy at the base is that everything starts with strategy, because strategy is basically what is the problem you solve? Who do you solve it for? And what are the outcomes you get? And then on the left side, you have marketing. And marketing is all about positioning. Because the position is, what do the people say about you when you're not in the room? Because the better you're positioned, the better you attract the right sorts of people to you. But conversely, you reject the wrong sorts of people. It's if you look at an obvious example, if you look at any sort of medical specialist, a specialist specializes in knees or orthopedics or ENT or cardiology, etc. People know what they stand for. They go to those people for those particular types of problems. And on the right-hand side is sales. And sales is all about the promise you make. What are the outcomes that you get for your clients? And so the way the three things connect is your strategy, which are the problems, basically define who you work with and the promise that you make. And the more precisely you can drill down into the problem, the better you will attract the right sorts of people to you and reject the wrong ones. The marketing is all about positioning, which builds directly from the problem, because positioning is your claim to expertise in solving specific problems for specific markets. And the narrower and more precisely defined your problems, the stronger your positioning becomes. And this is something that we, dare I say, we often fight with clients when they come to us, because I say, who is your market? What are the problems you solve? Oh, I can solve all of these different problems, and I can solve all of these different things for all of these different people. And I go, that's great. But the minute you do that, you dilute who you're actually serving, because you can't serve everybody. Pick something. Pick something relatively easy to explain, relatively expensive to solve, easy to explain, and target those people. Because if you have a position without a problem, you're simply doing empty marketing. And then a problem without a position means prospects can't find you and distinguish you from anybody else. And then sales is the thing that connects the problem directly to the outcome here. Because if the promise is the bridge, basically that shows prospects how you take them from their current reality, whatever their current reality is, to the promised outcome that you're going to give them. So this is the outcome you want. And that's why these things all stay together. Now, when we work with somebody, generally speaking, we would always start with the strategy, defining the problem first. We would then look at what is the promise and the outcome that you're going to get, and then how do you position yourself in that market? And these things all lock in together. They're not individual bits that just sit in isolation. And this is where I see a lot of people fall down, because what happens is that people just start tactics. They say, oh, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do LinkedIn, and I'm going to do something else, and I'm going to do Facebook and whatever else to get people into the funnel. And those are just pure tactics. So once you understand these, let me find a different color. You basically have to do three things. So basically at the bottom strategy level with the foundation, there are three elements. One is your expertise. This is not a very good color. And your expertise is the problems you solve and the outcomes you get for people.
Rashid, I think you need to use a different type of pen.
Well, this is the other one. Let's just see if this one works better.
Yeah,
Is that better?
a little bit.
A little bit. Okay, I'll see if I can get the chisel right.
Mm.
All right. So at the bottom, there's expertise. And your expertise has to basically, I'll try it this way. Your expertise basically talks to a particular type of market. And then once you've decided on who that market is, and the narrower you can make the niche, the more successful you're going to be. And when I say niche, you could say, I target financial planners, or I target lawyers, I target accountants, I target MSPs, IT people. Then, because if you can start talking the language that they use, they will feel that you understand them rather than some generic language that you could use. And the next thing over here is basically traffic. How you get in front of them. Because it's all very well to say that I'm looking for a particular market, but if you have no mechanism to get your message in front of those people and have them realize that you even exist, and that always comes down to economics. How much can you spend to acquire a client? And spend doesn't have to always be money, it can be time and effort as well. And if you get these three things right, what you're looking for here is to basically connect with the right sorts of people to build a database of potential clients. Can you see that? Let's see. On the left-hand side, under positioning, the first thing we want to look at is the message that we put out to the marketplace. Because the message has to basically talk about the problems that your marketplace is actually going to be facing, and partly the promise. But generally speaking, this is the interesting thing. If times are bad, we want to talk more about problems. If times are good, we want to talk more about aspiration. But people will generally take far faster action if somebody understands that there's a problem and they resonate with the problem. The second component of this is you have to attract. So you have the right message, you have to attract them using some form of traffic. So the traffic has to come in. And the last thing you need to do is basically educate them. And I say educate because in general, think about how you buy anything. You go and you do your research, you look for reviews, you look for who else might be buying it, you ask your peers, etc. So the better you can educate your potential market and your potential prospect as to why you should be the choice. And the way I would suggest doing it always is to tell them the questions they should be asking and then tell them the answers. Because when they then go and compare you to somebody else, you've actually pre-formatted their brains and saying, okay, these are the things you need to be looking for. Because your average buyer actually doesn't know what they should be looking for. They don't buy whatever it is you're selling on a day-to-day basis. So it's your job to actually educate them. And we know that statistically, certainly senior buyers, senior professionals are 60, 70, 80% of the way down the marketing funnel and the sales funnel before they even want to talk to a vendor. So they do a lot of the research before even coming in. So it's critical that you actually educate them. And if you educate them, you basically cultivate them. And you want to start creating qualified leads here. And when you've got people on your list that are coming in and the goal is to really have them raise their hands as much as possible, because somebody who raises their hands is going to be twice as likely to buy as somebody that you go out to cold. And people buy when they're ready, not when you need to make the deal. So that the more people you can get in to your orbit and your database down here that you've connected to, and the better you can educate them and cultivate them, the more likely they are to raise their hands and say, hey, I want to do something with you. So then when we come to the sales side, the first thing you need to do in a sales call, obviously, is to diagnose. Diagnose the issue that they're facing. Now, here's the interesting thing. There's a lot of, we're probably all familiar with the know, like, and trust mantra that goes on. We have to be liked by our clients. We have to form a relationship with our clients. Let's just turn that on its head for a second. yes, it's useful to be liked and have a long-term relationship once they become a client. But before they become a client, what you really want is to be seen as the credible authority. And it's more a matter of the respect and how you go about it. You don't need to spend a whole bunch of time becoming, wanting to be liked, forming a long-term relationship. That comes later on. It's like going to the doctor and the doctor says, well, I really want to, like me, and I'm going to sit here and I'm going to, talk about the weather for the next half an hour. No, you go in there, doctor looks at you and says, what's the issue? Why are you here? Unless it's pretty damn obvious you've got a broken arm, and they say, well, okay, we need to fix that. So the know, like, and trust only happens later down the track. And then once you have diagnosed their particular issues, you want to give them insights. And you give them insights as to what the real problem is that they've got, not the problem that they think they've got. And you can do that especially well if you specialize in a particular industry or specialized niche, a tribe of people, because you know the sorts of problems that they're likely to have. And you can also say, hey, listen, if you're doing this particular thing, you've got this particular problem, you're more than likely got this particular problem. This is how I've solved it here, here, and here, and here. And then finally, you've got to show them value and ROI. And value is in the eye of the beholder. So there are two types of value. There is the tangible value and there's the intangible value. And in any organization, most of us buy to reduce risk. Risk is the thing that will kill the sale. And the status quo of doing nothing is very often easier than doing something and taking a risk to actually spend money and effort and time. So your job is to figure out what is the value, what is the tangible value, which is usually time, money, efficiency, which comes back to time and money, and what are the intangibles. And the intangibles are very often what is good for the person is not necessarily good for the organization. So I've had instances where people have basically, a colleague of mine went into a major organization, the factory. He said, we can help you reduce your expenditure and raise your efficiency by 30-40%. He was literally walked out the door because the plant manager was going to lose out on his position and some of the junkets that he went on, even though it was good for the company. So it's something that we drill into people, is that value is in the eye of the beholder. So when we work with people, we go through this whole cycle again and again and again, because what we want here is basically to convert people into long-term clients. Because it's the long-term client, it's the long-term lifetime value is where the real value is for you and your clients. Because the hardest sale is the first sale. If you look at profitability, it's 7 to 8 to 9 times easier to keep upselling somebody than to bring somebody else new into the thing. So just unmute yourselves for a second and tell me what made sense out of all of that.
I think the area, Rashid, that we struggle with is probably, we're great farmers as a business, as an MSP. We're not great hunters, so attracting a new business. So I think the marketing and proposition piece for us is really important and something we need to get better at. Whereas, I think that once we get a lead and once we talk to a client or potential client, we're very good at converting them into a customer. But it's that missing piece of a small business in marketing and trying to attract the right people to us. That's the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd echo that from what I said before as well. But yeah, look, I completely agree that obviously we need to start by understanding the problem and not the solution. And so I think that's the bottom part where the strategy and understanding the problem we're trying to solve is difficult, given that we deal with enterprise clients across all different sectors. And so we could potentially work with any client across any sector, across any problem to some extent. So just trying to build campaigns around some known quantifiable problems is probably where we need a bit of focus.
Mm-hmm. And I think this is the thing that we very often see And we all fall into this trap where we think that, oh, if we narrow it down, we're going to miss out on all of these other people. The irony is, by narrowing it down, you actually attract some of those other people. And the minute you try and do everything for everybody, you do nothing for anybody, because the generalist never is the generalist. The GP doesn't make as much money as the specialist. If you've ever been to a specialist, you know how they charge. And the other interesting thing is, if you've gone to a specialist, and Barbara, you may want to talk about this if that's okay. Going to a specialist, did you like Ho?
Oh, which one are you talking about?
About Ho.
Oh, okay, yeah, okay. So I ended up in emergency, didn't really quite know why. And it turned out that my gallbladder was shot. And I didn't really know what that meant, but so I was in hospital, I was in the public system, it was all good, I was well catered for. And on Friday night at about 7 o'clock, this specialist turns up and rattles off at 1,000,000 miles an hour. What was wrong with me? What has to be done? And that I need to do it basically on Sunday morning. And I'm going, my head was spinning. I was not, you're not in the best space if you sort of haven't expected to go into surgery. And then, yeah, anyway, so I was just, oh, what about second opinion? What about sleeping over it? And what about that? Fortunately, Rashid was there, so he had a bit of a clearer head than I did at the point in time. And we said, look, not sure what. And he said, look, these are the risks, and we don't even want to talk about the worst case scenario, which months later I found out what that meant. And fortunately, Rashid has an aunt in Melbourne who is a medical doctor who ran a hospital. So she's 90, but she's got her marbles. So as the doctor left us alone, he said, I'm going to go and visit some other patients. I'll come back. So we spoke to the aunt in Melbourne, and she said, look, do it. The risks are too great. It's an operation. It's done 100 times a day in this country. It's a well-worn path. Just bite the bullet and go through it. So the surgeon came back after about an hour, and in the meantime, Rashid looked him up on LinkedIn as well. So he had a reasonably good LinkedIn profile. And I think the surgeon pretty much expected us to say no. So anyway, we went for the option, said, okay, let's do that. And sure enough, Sunday morning, I was under the knife, and everything's honky-dory. But if I had waited for too long, I could have died, because gallbladder not being treated can trigger, pancreatic cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And you usually get that only at stage 3 or 4. So, yeah. Yes.
But the interesting thing was, he was Australian-born Chinese guy, very boom, to the point, and he had a reputation. He'd been around a long time. He'd been in the hospital 20 years, but he had a real reputation of, take no prisoners. I'm not going to explain anything. Just do what I tell you to do. Okay? So it came down to, do we like this guy? Well, does it really matter? Is he telling me something that we need to do something about? Is there any point in getting another opinion in this particular case? Probably not. Well, I did. I phoned my aunt. But this was more a question of him having the credibility and the respect than having a long-term relationship. I hope I never see him again, to be honest. But that's the whole point. So you don't necessarily, and he's the specialist. He said, I do this day in and day out. These are the sorts of surgeries I perform. I actually asked him, I said, how many have you done? Oh, thousands. Okay? So that's the point I'm making. The point I'm making is that if you can narrow down what you do, then you can come across as a specialist, and you don't have to be arrogant about it, but you do have to say to people, hey, this is what I do day in and day out, and this is basically how we operate. So any other comments on that, by the way? Ali, how about you?
Now, there's a lot in there, but I think it just really ultimately will come back for me as well, understanding that audience, understanding, that persona, and like you said, you can't be all things to all people. So really being disciplined and making a call on where the unique expertise sits. So the audience piece, there's a lot of value in that, Rashid. So thank you. But I think, if you don't understand the audience, then any of the other elements of the 3 Ps somewhat, you're going to be on shaky ground with it as well. The other thing I will say that was quite interesting is, and I don't know how you find this out before you start going in there and having the decision or the conversations, but the risks that the decision maker has, how they differ from the risks of the organisation.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a really interesting point, right? Now, I don't know. I mean, that's a conversation maybe for another time. But how you identify what that is, so maybe you don't get, and maybe you don't need to be walked out of the building sometimes. Maybe that is the only outcome. But I found that was giving me a lot to think about around that.
Okay, good. All right. So as I mentioned, we obviously work with people in this area. So if you're interested in having a conversation with me about this afterwards, just let me know and we can arrange that. But finding out what's really going on is a really good segue. Whoops, sorry, go back. Segue to this. So your clients actually hold the key to your growth. And when we work with clients on a long-term basis, one of the first things we do is we actually interview their clients. And we interview their clients to find out what's really going on, the good, the bad, the ugly. And we used to do this primarily in the beginning because we used to write a whole bunch of marketing material for people. And the best way to do that was to actually find out what the clients really thought, what the clients really wanted, why they bought, and also interview people who didn't buy, why they didn't buy. And we realized that doing this was a standalone piece as well, because you can't do strategy in isolation. You can make all sorts of assumptions about what people want, but unless you ask them, you won't ever get to the truth. Now, there is a caveat to that. You can ask them, and we all know what happens when we ask one of our clients or prospects or whatever, or somebody, will they tell us the truth? Not always, because they don't want to hurt your feelings. They don't want to tell you what's really going on. And that's why we found that using a third party, and I'm me as the third party, I've done hundreds of interviews with people from very senior executives in very large multinationals, private school principals, all the way down to people on the shop floor. Now, my preference is the principals and the very senior people, because you get a lot of information out of people. And what happens, to answer your question, Ali, basically is they tell you how they think. They tell you why they bought. They tell you what they're looking for. They tell you all sorts of stuff that they wouldn't necessarily tell the actual client. They would tell me, they wouldn't necessarily tell you. Okay? And it's those hidden conversations that unlock a whole big bunch of revenue. And so I'll give you a couple of examples. Okay? So one of them is a leadership coach that we worked with a number of years ago. And he was selling a $23,000 program to principals. And when I spoke to these principals, and some of these conversations went for an hour, sometimes on more than one occasion, what we found was that the program that he had only went for a year. And I said to these principals, well, okay, are you getting the value that you want? And they said, look, we would really like something along the program. And I said, how long? And they said, about 3 years would do it. And I said, well, are you willing to pay for it? And they said, yes. So we went from 23,000 to 75,000. And then we also realized, talking to other principals of smaller schools, that one of his core components of this service basically could be hived off as a 25K service because they couldn't afford the whole enchilada. A recent example, and this is interesting because Craig is an engineer. He works a couple of different areas. One is the built environment, very specialist area. And he would be working through larger organizations, other consultancy companies. And the consulting company that he worked for would basically then on-sell to the developer. And when I interviewed some of the consultancy companies and they said, oh, look, how much work are you giving him? Oh, about 15, 20%. We're looking at doing some of it in-house, etc. To me, that's a bit of a red flag, And I said, okay, so how is he billing? Now, this was the interesting thing. He was actually doing the work for the consultancy company, but billing the developer. I'm like, really? That's interesting. I said, what would happen if he white labeled, gave you the reports, the this, the that, and the other, the drawings, you add your margin, you shove it on. They said we give him far more work. Interestingly enough, he's now getting 85% of the available work. Out of the number of consultancies that we spoke to, one of the major ones took it all in-house, but that often happens. Now, what's also interesting with Craig is that all happened 4 years ago. That work is still coming in. And 4 years later, almost to the day, he rang me up, and I'd kept in touch with him. He rang me up and he said, oh, look, I'm just expanding my business. I've got another couple of guys, they're both engineers in different areas. We need to teach them how to bring in business and sell. Can you help? So we're now doing another major project with him. It just shows the power of keeping in touch with people. Another client of ours, Fairmont Equities, been a client for 12 years, something like that. On a regular basis, we ring his clients and find out how he's doing. One of the people we rang said that Michael had saved him $1 million a year in fees. This guy obviously has a lot of money. There's no doubt about it. But he saved him $1 million a year, and he made him another $1 million a year in returns. And because of those stories, talking to a number of his clients who got really good returns, we put that out as part of his marketing material, and he got 5 new clients with $500,000 to invest within 2 months. It just shows the power of actually talking to your clients, getting those case studies, getting those testimonials. And that's something that we offer as a standalone service or as part of our longer term engagement. Now, here's the interesting thing. So Michael Sakalis, basically another client that worked with us, came back and just ran the hidden revenue diagnostic, which is the interviews. One of the things we found out from him, and he deals with people like Rio Tinto, PowerLink, all of those sorts of large mining companies. One of his clients, major corporation, had pigeonholed him into a particular area and didn't even consider him for something that was his actual bread and butter. They didn't know he did it. And therefore, he lost the deal to another Big Four organization, even though it's his bread and butter. Something else that came out was that he wasn't dealing with the right level of the organization. He was sort of dealing with upper middle, but not upper. And he needed to move upwards into the strategy for Cameron Fairburn, Braxham Cyber, said to me, I know my clients really well. I talk to my clients all the time. I said, really? When I spoke to his clients, they said the number one risk that they felt was that he was key man. What happens if he left? We managed to, him knowing that, he could then assuage the client and say, look, this is my company. I'm going to be here out for a long time. And basically it gave him clarity as to how to move forward. So that is a service that we do offer as a standalone. So if you're interested in that, by all means, give me a call. It's well worth doing just to know where you sit, what your clients are really looking for. And it opens up other opportunities because out of this process, you also get case studies, you get testimonials out of them. You know exactly what's going on. You get a full transcript. You get a detailed analysis of where you could improve. And what's really interesting is people have very long memories. I've had instances where people have said, something happened 5 years ago, and they remember, but it was fixed. So, and the other thing is people really appreciate the fact that you took the trouble to ask them. They really appreciate that you were interested enough to ask them. So, moving on, let's look at the prospect engagement spectrum. So there are obviously 4 types of prospects that you've got. The easiest person to get more business out of is an existing client. They know you, they like you, they trust you, you've got a relationship, and I'm assuming you've done a really good job for them. The question is, what else could you do for them? And very often that comes out of those client interviews where we look at the hidden revenue that's sitting there that people didn't even realize that you could do, but they didn't know that you could do. And sometimes they say, oh, well, it would be good if they could do something over here. And sometimes it can be quite different. Sometimes it's just a slight twist, tangent, and that gives you a whole new product line that you could take on. Past clients, another one. Number of clients that come back to us year after year after year, sometimes with a gap, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, sometimes only a year, but they come back because you keep in touch with them. And this is really critical. So there's the 90-day rule. The 90-day rule says that if somebody hasn't heard from you in 90 days, on day 91, if somebody else comes along with a service that you could have provided, they will go with that person. And it happens on day 91. And the woman who found this out was a woman called Wendy Evans. And she worked with the likes of Saki & Saki, Intercon Hotels, Thomas Cook Travel. And one day I had this guy, I'd written about this, and I had this guy ring me up and he said, I've been working with this client for 20 years. He was a printer. He went and delivered some stuff to the warehouse and he looked around and he said, oh, what's that stuff in the corner over there? And the guy said, oh, well, we just ordered that stuff. And he said, oh, I could have done that. And the guy says, we didn't know. We hadn't heard from you for quite a while. We didn't know. $50,000 order. That's the power of keeping in touch with somebody. And the next thing, obviously, are the warm leads. And the warm leads come from these people up here where you cultivate them. So you're continuously cultivating them. That's why we always put stuff out on LinkedIn. We put stuff on newsletters. You don't know when somebody is going to be ready to buy. And finally, they're the cold leads. They're the cold leads that come in that need to be warmed up and cultivated. And then if we look at the leaky bucket syndrome, what happens is that leads come in, people raise their hands, people say, look, I'm interested, and they don't hear anything back from you. Interest drops off exponentially. Studies show that within 2 minutes, interest starts to wane. I mean, that's frightening when you think about it. I've had instances where I have rung somebody back half a day later and they say, wow, that was really quick. Thank you for getting back to me so fast. Most of the time, people do not bother following up. I've had calls from people where, you expressed some interest. I said, really? When? We looked it up 2 years ago. All right. If I was interested 2 years ago, what makes you think that I even remember? I don't even remember what happened a month ago. So the faster you can respond to somebody, and it doesn't have to be a major response, it's just an acknowledgement. Hey, I got your message. I'll call you back, whatever it is, but you need to do that. Otherwise, you're just wasting a whole bunch of money and time getting people into the funnel that they just fall off at the end. And here's the interesting thing. The fortune is always, always, always in the follow-up. In the old days, we used to say it took about 4 to 5 touches to get somebody over the line. Today, it takes 20 to 25 touches to get over the line. But what's also interesting is something they now call brand width. And it is the amount of time somebody spends binging your material, whether it's videos, articles, white papers. The more they read, the more they watch, the more likely they are to become a client. We have a number of free things that we give away. Okay, so one of the first one was about a 50-page document on 12 marketing strategies. And we'd have people who would download that, I'd ring them up, I'd have a chat with them, and at some point they would turn up. And they would turn up and they'd printed this 50 pages out and they'd highlighted all sorts of stuff on it. And they'd already decided to become a client. The only thing was they wanted to make sure what the deal was. That is the power of a lot of content that is targeted, though, at the right people. You don't want general content. You want very specific content that gets people in the door. So Any comments on any of that?
No, makes sense, Rashid. Yeah.
Anything specific that makes sense?
It's the content, right, and the system to kind of create that engaging content. I think that's probably the biggest gap we have to creating some of those warm leads. Existing client base is strong. Revenue diagnostic stuff really interesting. Might be a blind spot there and thinking we do a really good job, but yeah, definitely the system for creating content is really challenging when you're doing the work, right?
Yeah.
You know, it's always a thing that kind of gets put on the back burner a little bit. And a case study every now and again shoved online don't really cut it.
Yeah. So the thing is, you don't need a large audience. You know, you don't need millions of people in your audience. You just need the right people and enough of them. And if they engage with you at some point, if they understand that you can solve the problem that they have because you've articulated the problem almost better than they can, that's when they come in. That's when they raise their hands. So we're basically almost at the top of the hour. So I've got a couple of things. One is I'm happy to have a chat with you individually to see where you're at, whether we can do something together or not. I can lay out lay out a plan for you and say, look, these are the things that need to be done. You know, is it the strategy? Is it the marketing? Is it the sales? Where are the leaks? Where are the issues? So if you're interested in that, by all means, give me a yell. I'll chase you up anyway, just to see where you're at, and I'd like to get some feedback from you anyway. So essentially, we're at the end of the presentation, as they say. So any other comments that anybody would like to make?
I think your content really resonates with some of the challenges that we're facing in our business, Rashid. So yeah, I would appreciate a follow up to have a chat.
Okay, certainly, I can certainly do that. Joff?
Well, thank you for your time, Rashid. Some of it's kind of a bit of a reminder about the things that really matter, which has been really helpful. Yeah, I just need to have a little think. I think is where I'm at really. Kind of as I said before, I just want to make sure that I'm not I've got some of the blind spots around our existing client base and yeah, and think about the system for how we start to create warm leads because we haven't got one. Is the honest truth, you know.
Well, it's better. I guess it's better to know that and admit that than, you know, because referrals only get you so far. And
yeah, well, we're all word of mouth. That's the thing.
We're all word of mouth,
nice, but
and you can't control it. You don't know.
Yeah, that's, I mean, you're at the mercy, and so you know, things are going well, but you kind of go, you don't feel the control that it is because there's no system that's kind of, you know. And it's very dependent on me and my business partner. You know, we are the faces of the business. So, yeah, a system would be better than just word of mouth and goodwill. Yeah.
Yeah, and one of the things I'm just redoing my website, and it's all about founder dependency because if you're the founder or the business owner or the partner and everything comes through you, that's dependency.
Yeah.
You can't scale.
Yeah.
And it's the system that does the work. And therefore, if you have the system, and this is the other thing that I see, you know, people hire salespeople, especially in the IT industry. And we're talking, you know, companies that are doing maybe $5-10 million a year, and they hire somebody and they pay them $200,000, $250,000 base salary. And at the end of the year, they've sold nothing.
Yeah, I've done that before.
Yep. Funny that, isn't it? So you're 250 grand down the line. You wasted a year. You haven't had any more sales because you haven't hired the right person. And even if you did hire the right person, there's no system behind it to help them actually bring in the leads, cultivate them, have a sales conversation. Amy, I know you've been on this before. Anything stand out to you? All good, she says. All right. Okay, well, thank you, everybody. And look, I will be in touch, and I'm more than happy to sit down with you and go through that and possibly talk about how we could do something together.
Yeah, nice. Thanks, Rashid. Appreciate it.
All right. Have a good afternoon, everybody.
Yeah.